Hello, this is Angela with Parker's Permaculture. I'm standing in the backyard of my Portland, Oregon permaculture garden in Zone 9A. I'm actually down in the sun trap orchard portion of my garden. I have a video where I talk about sun traps. So my garden is, quarter acre, and that means I have to design very efficiently. And it means that I typically have to put things in closer than someone in a larger garden might and have a little bit more maintenance when it comes to pruning. It also means that I select a lot of dwarf and semi-dwarf varieties, understanding that that limits the lifespan of those trees, but it also means that they fit. So I'm down in the orchard part here. I'm gonna turn around. My garden is absolutely exploding with native bees today. So they're loving the sunshine and everything in bloom. Okay, so I made a video yesterday where I was talking about imperfection in a permaculture garden and having appropriate expectations and understanding what permaculture design is, how it is not going to give you this utopian pest and disease-free garden. And anybody who promises that is fooling you, right? They are not able to follow through on that promise. So I'm down here. You can see here I have my Seckel Pear, my beloved Seckel Pear here. It's a mostly self-fertile pear and my favorite choice for a dessert pear if you can only pick one pear variety. Behind I have some figs, more figs, medlar, and then we move down into a part of the garden that has apples and gummy berries and things like that. But I want to talk specifically about this pear today because this pear is perfectly, let's wait for this car to go by. My neighbor's car to go by. Normally my Seckel Pear gives me very few problems and produces high yields of these sweet, wonderful dessert pears. They're little, but again, doesn't need a pollination partner, and they are highly resistant to fire blight. I've never had fire blight on my pears. Oh, knock on wood. It doesn't mean there's no pest and disease pressure at all. And, we had some wonky weather. We had kind of a wet spring. And I've noticed that not just my pears, but my Juneberries and a couple of other things are struggling with a pest that I don't often see, and that's rust. I've never really had rust on my pears. I mean, I'll sometimes get like a couple of leaves, but this year it's real bad, and I'm not treating it. I'm not spraying any copper fungicide because not only is their fruit set right now, but also the pollinators are out everywhere in the garden, and copper fungicide, like maybe organic, but it's not, doesn't mean that it's healthy or good for you or safe. So, and definitely not for wildlife either. So I'm actually just letting it do its thing. So let me show you what it looks like a little bit here. And the typical way to deal with this would be to remove all infected leaves and burn or destroy them, because this is a fungal disease. But I'm not going to do that because I would have to strip probably 30% of the leaves off of this tree, and that doesn't make any sense. But I think it's important to remember when we're looking at pest and disease pressure that sometimes some growing season, some year is an outlier. And because a plant in your garden struggles in 1 year, or even like your livestock in your garden struggles in 1 year, that doesn't mean that you are necessarily setting up cycles of disease. And it doesn't mean that that problem is going to become endemic in your garden. Now, yes, rust is endemic in my region, right? It's very common in the Pacific Northwest. The fungus is here, but usually if you have a good, strong permaculture system where you're feeding your soil and your plants are well supported and you're not over fertilizing so that your plants can have like healthy, thick tissues that have the right amount of compounds that can help them resist pest and disease pressure, keep it kind of balanced, right? Then you'll end up with a little bit here and there. You'll end up with some ugly fruit. You'll end up with some disease. You'll end up with some spotty leaves. You'll end up with some loss, but it won't be devastating because in a permaculture system, we're mimicking systems in nature, and nature comes with pests and diseases, right? Bugs are part of an ecosystem. They provide food for reptiles, amphibians, birds, spiders, etc., etc. And diseases have their place too. But when we get kind of a larger impact than we normally have, sometimes we need to step in and intervene, especially if we have a system where we are still working on healing the soil. We are still working on regenerating and giving our plants the optimal conditions they need to be as strong as possible. also in any given year, there may be some kind of outside event, some kind of abiotic interference that weakens a plant and makes it more susceptible in that particular year. Doesn't mean that it will happen every year. So you have a cold, wet spring. That is prime circumstances for fungal diseases to come in and be more impactful that year. You are sick or injured and you neglect to prune your plant. That's sort of a lack of an interference. You neglect to prune your tree in the winter. And so you have a lack of air circulation, and that means your tree is more susceptible, right? So there's all kinds of factors that can kind of be a one-off, like, well, I guess this is not the year for this plant, right? And that's part of the reason that in a permaculture system, we grow a huge diversity of crops, because we know that in any given year, something might struggle, but we're not gonna have a total loss in our garden. So if it ends up being a bad pear year, well, girlfriend, I got figs, I got mulberries, I got sea buckthorn, I've got grapes. This is shaping up to be the best grape year I have ever had. I'm gonna have grapes. I won't know what to do with all the grapes. I'm gonna put a bunch out in the farm stand when they're ripe, but often the circumstances that mean that some particular plant struggles and has a harder year means that if you have a diversity of crops, some other plant is going to love those circumstances and you might get a boom that year. Okay, so here's my Seckel Pear. I forgot to thin this one, but let me show you what it looks like when I'm done thinning. I've had problems with branch breakage in the past because it sets so heavily. So I thin my pears so that there's only one or two. Oh, here's another one I missed. 1 or 2 per cluster. So 5 is too many, I'll get broken branches. Here's one I thinned. I found that my Seckel Pear doesn't self-thin that well, and so I need to take it down so that I don't get those broken branches. But you can see here, you can see the issue that I'm talking about. So I'm not gonna freak out because this is the first year and I've had this tree for 14 years and never had an issue like this before. You can also see I have some water sprouts here. This pear, while it is a semi-dwarf, and I try to keep it right at 6 feet tall so that it is not taller than me and I can reach everything from the ground, I do have to control a lot of really vertical shoots. Pears, grafted pears, tend to grow in an unfortunate kind of narrow habit with very narrow crotches to narrow angles to the branches, and that means a lot of branch spreading. You can see I want this really wide branch angle here that helps reduce branch breakage, but you can also see that the angle that they want to send off is like this, right? Is like this. I don't want that. Take that off. I want to encourage the production of spurs, and I want to encourage horizontal branching for stability and for yield. Because we don't want broken branches. That's a way that infection can set in. Broken branches are an open wound. So any broken branches are not a great idea. I want controlled disturbance. I want to prune so I get the shape that I want. And I want to snap off any of those vertical shoots. When they're little, you don't actually have to use pruners, and you get a cleaner healing, quicker healing if you just snap it off at the abscission point. Comes off really cleanly and heals very, very quickly. So I try to get these water sprouts when they're little. Some of these big guys, I'm gonna have to use pruners, but okay, that's a look at how my Seckel Pear is doing so far this year. Not great in terms of the rust issue, but loads of fruit set that has no rust on it whatsoever. Rust really goes for the leaves, not the fruit on pears. And hopefully I'll still get a great yield despite the cosmetic situation going on here. I think it's really good to be real and talk about our struggles in permaculture, talk about when things go sideways, talk about how we're not going to have a perfect utopian garden. It's not going to look like something out of a Ghibli movie, right? It's not going to be perfect. There's going to be issues. And I think it's important that we're all real with each other about that, and that we understand the circumstances that create those issues, and that we have realistic expectations as a result. So thanks so much for watching today. I'm getting ready to go to Atlanta. I think I said that in my last video, in a day or two. So please keep following. B and I will give you updates from our trip there.
Okay, a quick note from editing Angela. Obviously, I didn't get this video posted before I left or while we were in Atlanta. The schedule was far more hectic than I anticipated. We also got caught in the rain. There is no rainstorm like an Atlanta rainstorm. Here's B from her competition. I will have more updates about this later. We also got to see the Georgia Aquarium, and I had hoped to make more content while we were there, but that's just not how things turned out. So
she's never been to the South, and I think it's going to be a little rough for her going there in July. She's not prepared. Oregon, we don't really have humidity. It's very dry here, and you know, it's been hot with temperatures over 100 for several days out of the last 2 weeks, but the humidity is like a whole other thing. And speaking as someone who spent most of her childhood in Texas, like I'm not excited about it, and I think we're going to spend as much time as possible inside. She's going to be in a courtroom doing mock trial, so we won't be outside that much, but we're thinking of going to the aquarium and maybe also the Civil Rights Center. So if you are from Atlanta or that area and have ideas of anything else we should check out on our last free day after the competition, please let me know in the comments. Again, don't forget to click like and subscribe, and also have a Patreon. If you don't want to support me on a monthly basis, you might consider checking out my Venmo. You can just like throw a couple bucks at Parker's Permaculture Venmo. That's a great way to say thanks. I appreciate the work that you do. And I'll be back real soon. Thanks.